In this video, we are going to demonstrate the use of a for loop, and we are going to use an accumulating variable to calculate the total number of pumpkins in our pumpkin patch. So we'll prompt the user for the how many varieties we have, and then prompt how many of each variety we have, and it will accumulate the total of pumpkins. We've got a few pieces of code already in place here. We got our scanner object. We have the number of varieties variable, the total pumpkins variable, and then pumpkins per variety. And we have a prompt for our user that will ask how many different types or how many different varieties of pumpkins do you have is going to be our question. And so as they enter that, then that's going to tell us how many times we're going to need to execute the loop to enter the total for each variety. So the number of varieties will be the next integer that is inputted, where there is no input validation in this example. And our for loop will then start with a count of 1. We will ask it to count up to the number of varieties. So this is why it's called a definite loop, because it starts at 1. It's going to go to number of varieties. We know before this loop executes that it's going to run exactly the same number of time as we have varieties. So if I have 5 different varieties, this loop is going to run 5 times. And so because I know that before we start, it's called a definite loop. So we prompted them to input that, and next we're going to need to prompt them to input how many for each variety. And I'm going to say something like how many pumpkins of variety, and what I want to do is put in my count variable, because then it will say of variety 1 and then variety 2, etc. Pumpkins per variety will be the variable I use in order to store that. And again, I am not doing any input validation at this time. And then I want to accumulate the total. So total pumpkins is going to accumulate each amount per variety as we continue through the loop. When we are all done, we will then want to output the total number of pumpkins in order to see how big our pumpkin patch was. We are using concatenation and total pumpkins with no formatting or anything. It should be an integer. And then we will correct our errors before we execute this code. We do Control F11. So how many different varieties? I'm just going to say 3 for the sake of this example. And then it should prompt me to execute this console 3 times. Let me kind of pull this over here a little bit so we can see it execute. How many of variety 1? I'll say 10, variety 2, 20, variety 3, 30. So we have a total of 60 in our pumpkin patch. So that just gives you a little bit of an example of how to use an accumulating variable within a for loop, and that the for loop is a definite loop